Gabriella and Taylor had been inseparable since their early years. Their homes were just a stone's throw away from each other, practically making their friendship inevitable. Moreover, their families were interconnected through marriage. Gabriella wasn't quite sure how, thinking maybe they were brothers-in-law or perhaps cousins. This familial tie meant they often shared festive celebrations together. Gabriella was a well-behaved child, yet she started school later than most. As a result, she taught herself to read. One day, her father returned from the city with a picture book, which captivated Gabriella for countless hours. Her father helped her occasionally, but her mother was of no assistance as her expertise was solely in handling finances, never in reading. Taylor, on the other hand, was described by her mother as a wild child, always up to some mischief. She was quite the tomboy, forever coming home with new scrapes and bruises from climbing trees or getting tangled in skirmishes. She began to mellow as she matured, especially after the year she lost both her mother and then her father. It was later discovered that the couple who raised her weren't her biological parents. Her biological mother, the younger sister of the woman Taylor knew as her mother, had passed away in childbirth. Taylor's biological father, overwhelmed, had written to her aunt, "Take the child, or I'll have to place her in an orphanhood. I can't manage on my own." Her adoptive parents, who had no children of their own, embraced her without a second thought and adored her deeply despite her rowdy behavior. After her parents passed away, Taylor stumbled upon some old documents and letters from her biological father. These papers were barely legible, yet she managed to gather some understanding from them. She never sought out her real father and continued living in the house she grew up in. Eventually securing a job, Taylor found some stability, but soon decided that village life was too constricting for her ambitions. Despite Gabriella's heartfelt attempts to convince her otherwise, Taylor set her sights on the city. Taylor only returned for Gabriella's wedding, to see her old friend marry a reliable, kind-hearted tractor driver, a prestigious role at the time. A couple of years later, Taylor visited again for the birth of Gabriella's first child. She arrived with presents, dressed smartly, yet there was a hint of melancholy in her demeanor. They lingered together for quite some time. "Taylor, at least update me on your life. Where might you be these days? How's everything going?" And really, there's not much to speak of. "I clock in at the works, collect my earnings, and that's about the sum of it." "So when's your wedding bell going to ring?" "In 2 short years, you'll hit the big 3-0. Who'll be looking your way then?" "I've got no plans to tie the knot. Life's quite the party as is. You wouldn't believe the number of fellas around here, all eager to shower me with presents and dough. And one of them, 'Anyway, how's your Ethan doing?' He drops off his wages, drowns a few sorrows, and it's straight to slumber for him. Where's the spark in that? Oh, Taylor, that's no way to live. You ought to think about settling down, starting a family." "Nah, that just isn't for me. If I ever feel the itch to fuss over kids, I'll just pop over to your place." Taylor glanced towards Gabriella. "Hey Gab, mind if I camp out at your place this summer? I could lend a hand with the little guy, kick around some. He'll be what, 6 months old? Taylor, you're more than welcome anytime. We've got plenty of room, and Ethan wouldn't mind. He's practically living in the fields all summer anyway." Gabriella gave a wistful smile. She doubted Taylor would actually make the trip. What would pull her away from her city life? Taylor's place was a faded memory by now, perhaps a reason she stayed put. But time will tell, as they say. In the summertime, Taylor really did show up. She and Ethan were in the middle of dinner when she strolled in. She casually said hello, standing uncertainly at the doorway, asking, "You're not gonna kick me out, are you?" At that moment, everything clicked for Gabriella. The reason for Taylor's summer visit was staring her right in the face. Taylor was heavily pregnant, ready to go into labor any day now. Gabriella sprang into action, bustling about while Ethan initially stayed silent, then casually shrugged. These women, I don't get 'em. Gabriella's got it all figured out. She'll handle it. And me. I'm just a guy. I'll pitch in if I'm needed. After they wrapped up dinner and Ethan hit the hay, Gabriella perched on the bed beside her friend, eager for the full story. So spill the beans. What's there to say? I fell for some guy from the big city. He was installing new gear at our factory. We were inseparable, crazy in love, didn't care about anyone else. Then he got reassigned, and I found out I was expecting. Do you have his address? Yeah, I know it, but I'm not writing him. We had a blowout before he left, and I planned to handle this on my own. Oh, Taylor, that's a mistake. He might be holding a grudge, but there's a baby involved. He's the father and should know. I'm not doing anything about it. My baby, end of story. Later, Gabriella filled Ethan in on the details. He shook his head thoughtfully. Gab, let it be. If she's made up her mind, then so be it. She's nearly 30. Let her have this for herself. She probably came here to give birth anyway. There are good doctors in the city, and ours are just as good. Our Semyonovna has delivered countless babies. She's got it covered. Let Taylor stay, help her settle in, show her the ropes. Besides, it'll be company for you. I'm hardly ever around. Gabriella embraced her husband warmly, feeling ever so grateful for having such a wonderful Ethan. Taylor eyed Gabriella somewhat cautiously that morning, but there was no follow-up to the conversation. Taylor eventually settled down and exhaled heavily. A week passed, and Taylor went into labor. Although the baby, a little girl, was delivered safely, Taylor encountered serious complications. They sped her off to the city, but she didn't make it. When Gabriella received word of Taylor's passing, her countenance darkened with grief. Ethan was equally distressed. He knew how much Taylor meant to his wife. Gabriella seated herself before him and declared, "You might want to scold me, kick me out, but I won't let Taylor's girl end up in an orphanage. I'm taking her in. If we've got room for one, we've got room for another." For the first time, Ethan heard unyielding determination in his wife's voice. He glanced up to see Gabriella's eyes ablaze with resolve, ready to defend her decision. Surprisingly, he didn't contest her. All he replied was, "That's right." Turns out Gabriella also had a daughter. Just a half-year gap between her and Adam, making things a tad easier for Gabriella. She worried about being drained, but Sadie turned out to be a serene baby, always snoozing. Fast forward 5 years, and Sadie bears a striking resemblance to her mother, equally lacking warmth. She often pulled her brother Adam into her escapades. The workers frequently found feathers on the feeder or the radio. The mastermind behind these antics was never a mystery, yet punishment was shared equally. That same year, Gabriella welcomed another baby girl, Scarlett. By this time, Gabriella was well into her 3rd decade. She and her husband concluded their family was complete. They were content, having a good life. After work, Ethan would come home, keen to contribute, especially since their house was relatively new, just a couple of years old. It was time for school. With matching bouquets of flowers, Adam and Sadie, hand in hand, strode confidently. Gabriella and Ethan followed closely behind, with little Scarlett perched in Ethan's arms. It was their first significant event, marked with a sense of occasion. With high spirits, they noticed an automobile, a luxurious one at that. Automobiles hadn't always been a rarity, but this particular one was a stranger to their village, never having graced their roads before. Alongside the vehicle stood a man and an aging woman. Ethan stepped forward, driven either by curiosity to uncover the identities of these unexpected visitors, or perhaps merely to offer directions. "Hello, looking for someone?" "Hello, are you Nikolai?" "Yes, that's me. What brings you here?" "We've come to see you, to visit your family." These words reached Gabriella's ears too. She eyed the car and its occupants. Unmistakably outsiders, undoubtedly from some distant place. Ethan exchanged a glance with his wife and addressed the visitors again. "Well, come on in, let's not stand around gawking." Gabriella hurriedly prepared the dining table. She observed the elderly woman retrieving a sizable bag from the automobile, from which she began distributing gifts to the children. "What's the meaning of this? Why do you, complete strangers, come bearing such gifts?" "We don't even know you," thought the perplexed Gabriella. "Gabriella, don't worry, we mean well. We'll explain everything soon, just without the kids around." They settled themselves comfortably in the garden, while Gabriella presented a delightful spread of tea and freshly purchased cookies, perfectly timed for the day of knowledge. The hosts anxiously awaited an explanation, but Adrian struggled to find the right words. "Allow me to introduce myself," he began. "My name is Adrian, and approximately 7 years ago, I arrived in your magnificent city to assist with the installation of equipment at the factory. Currently, I'm employed as an engineer in the capital, working at a larger and more advanced facility." In an instant, Gabriella's eyes widened with realization upon hearing his first utterance. Even Ethan grasped the truth. He gently placed his hand on his wife's arm, silently urging her to remain composed. Adrian continued with a heavy heart. "It was there that I met Taylor, and we embarked on a passionate love affair. I grew so fond of her that marriage was on my mind. However, Taylor had been exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior in recent times, her sanity slowly slipping away. We had a terrible argument, and in the hopes of allowing her time to cool down, I made the fateful decision to leave. I intended to return for her after a month had passed. Unfortunately, destiny played a cruel hand when a severe illness befell me. I concluded it was not meant to be, that I had no right to track her down without an explanation. Then just a month ago, I was unexpectedly dispatched back to this very city on a business assignment. It was during this time that I encountered our mutual acquaintance, who revealed the devastating news that Taylor had given birth, but tragically lost her life in the process. Determined to uncover the pieces of her life, I began gathering information about you, her dear friend, and your daughter Sadie. I swiftly called my mother, who promptly made her way here." Gabriella gazed at them with eyes brimming with tears. "Are you here to take Sadie away?" "No, not to whisk her off. Actually, we're here to get to know her, lend a hand, and hang out. We're from the capital, where we have a spacious apartment and enough cash to be comfortable. Maybe she'll want to come visit, and we might become pals. If that doesn't pan out, we'll still drop by to assist. Our intention isn't to cause any distress for either Sadie or you. But just so you know, the education and lifestyle in the capital are worlds apart from here." Gabriella comprehended his emotions. She observed a woman gazing at the youngsters, her expression filled with warmth. Her smile was gentle and sincere. While Adrian's mother remained behind, Adrian himself ventured into the urban sprawl. He returned every 3 days, engaging with the children, not solely with Sadie, but with each one of them. Gabriella and Ethan looked on. Their hearts were heavy with empathy for both Sadie and Adrian. And Adrian's mother as well. They discussed this with Ethan and later conveyed to Adrian. "If she chooses to leave, we'll offer no objections, as it's clear she holds a special place in your heart." A week later, Sadie was set to depart. The allure of the metropolis was strong, yet her heartstrings tugged at the thought of her mother. Nevertheless, she reassured her, "I'll grow up and return to you." Gabriella wept as if a fragment of her very soul had been torn away. Recovery eluded her for a prolonged period. A year on, correspondence from the capital arrived, including several snapshots of Sadie, radiant, adorned with voluminous bows, dressed in fine attire. 4 decades had elapsed. Her children had long since relocated to the city, scarcely visiting their maternal home. 15 years earlier, she had laid Ethan to rest. After his funeral, visits from them dwindled to a mere 4 occasions. Overwhelmed, Gabriella reached out to Scarlett. Through tears, she implored her to offer assistance, lamenting, "Adam, the roof is severely leaking, and if we neglect it, the ceiling is sure to cave in. Mom, why don't you ask somebody else? I really can't manage it. I've got work and my own family needs to attend to." "Sweetheart, nobody's about to lift a finger without getting something in return. You know well enough that my pension isn't exactly fattening my wallet. Listen, Mom, I'm not swimming in cash either." Between the kids and the upkeep on the summer cottage, he terminated the call with a heavy sigh. He was utterly overwhelmed. It seemed everyone had their hand out, some clamoring for financial aid, others seeking his time and effort. But he's not made of elastic. He can't stretch himself to meet everyone's demands. Shortly thereafter, Gabriella reached out to her daughter, though this exchange was even more brief. "Scarlett, could you possibly make it over here?" "What for?" "Honey, the roof's springing leaks left and right. I swear the ceiling seconds from caving in." "You expect me to mend your roof?" "Oh, I lost my marbles." "Why don't you take this up with the village council? They should be able to assist." And just like that, her daughter hung up the phone. Gabriella didn't even get the chance to say she'd already set off. They'd informed her that help was reserved for those without any family, and she had children. Gabriella felt tears welling up. What now? If she handed over her entire pension, she wouldn't have anything left for food. Borrowing money. What a dreadful thought. And besides, there was no one to lend her any. The village was filled with elderly folks. Borrowing would mean repaying, and repaying with what? Her pension barely covered the basics. Braden had mentioned that re-registering something could bring in more funds, but that'd mean a trip to the city. How on earth would she manage that? The distance was one thing, the difficulty another. And as if things couldn't get worse, this spring, her ceiling had given way. Those incessant spring rains had been merciless. First, the ceiling sank in the small room, then the larger one too. For a whole month, she had to live in the kitchen until the weather improved. One day, she walked in from outside and could see the sky through the kitchen roof. She salvaged whatever she could and dragged it to the barn. Thankfully, Braden lent a hand with some of the larger items. She stuffed the gaps in the shed with blankets to fend off mosquitoes and block the wind. In her toughest moments, Gabriella wished she'd pass away before autumn arrived because winter seemed unbearable. But you can't live on wishes alone. The vegetable garden still needed tending. So she toiled there all day, bit by bit, taking care not to wear herself out. It was a decent little garden, perfect for these retirement years. Gabriella made the decision to use the funds solely for purchasing bread and butter. Although she couldn't afford to repair the entire ceiling, perhaps she could patch up some of the rooms, even if it meant boarding up the rest. Maybe her pleas would go unheard by God, or maybe she wouldn't meet her demise due to a fall. Gabriella attempted to recall when her children no longer depended on her. As long as she graced this earthly realm and was capable of bringing her grandchildren over for the summer, she remained essential. They would accompany her when Ethan was still alive. However, their visits became more and more infrequent. As the grandchildren matured and no longer required a babysitter, they lost touch with their ancestral abode. Gabriella sought excuses for her offspring. Residing in the busy city, constant schedules, and financial constraints, they were accumulating wealth. If only Gabriella could lend a hand, she would travel herself. They wouldn't have to toil as arduously. Yet Gabriella believed she couldn't do anything worthwhile. She only impeded others' progress. When the ceiling eventually gave way and she relocated to the barn, she refrained from reaching out to anyone. Why burden them unnecessarily? She would soon pass, and the barn would become her abode. Gabriella perched herself in the vegetable garden amidst the neatly arranged beds. Settling down, she found herself unable to rise as her legs had grown weak. Suddenly, she detected a faint noise coming from the yard. Could it be someone approaching? Perhaps Braden, if anyone. The question lingered as Braden had knowledge of her whereabouts. Nonetheless, Braden was nowhere to be seen. Motivated by sheer determination, Gabriella summoned her strength and managed to stand. A small feat accomplished, and she was ready to embark on her journey. With a heavy reliance on her walking stick, she slowly made her way through the yard. The garden gate, connecting the vegetable patch and the yard, had been hanging precariously on a single hinge for quite some time. Gabriella constantly grappled with it, attempting to secure it in a balanced manner. Finally, success. Gabriella crossed the threshold and entered the yard. Pausing for a moment, she observed a beautiful white automobile by the gate. Braden had mentioned these foreign vehicles, asserting that they were manufactured by the Germans. No one occupied the car, and the yard was vacant as well. A wave of fear washed over Gabriella. What if there was an uninvited guest within her home? Worst case scenario, it could also be someone intent on causing harm. Worried yet hopeful, Gabriella made her way into the house. The door was indeed ajar. As she entered, her gaze fell upon a woman standing before a wall adorned with numerous photographs. A young man stood nearby. Their attire, resplendent and expensive, sharply contrasted with the dilapidation surrounding them. Gabriella narrowed her eyes and inquired, "Who are you looking for?" The woman let out a tired sigh and turned around. Gabriella's heart skipped a beat. Taylor was peering back at her. Taylor. The lady grinned, and suddenly Gabriella clutched her chest. Sadie. The lady hurried towards her, embracing and kissing her. "Mama Gabriella, I witnessed all of this. I assumed you were already gone. The house lies abandoned. I cannot express how relieved I am that you are alive, so very relieved. Colton, allow me to introduce Mama Gabriella, the most remarkable human being I have ever had the pleasure of knowing." Colton, Sadie's offspring, also embraced his grandmother. They ventured out into the courtyard. Sadie resumed speaking. "Well, Mom, do guide us to the spot where we shall partake in tea and pose inquiries." Gabriella smiled. Sadie, with her restless nature, always took charge of situations right from the start. "You see, our table remains intact. It is nestled beneath the apple tree. However, I haven't used it in quite some time." Sadie turned around and made her way to the table. She recollected how Papa Ethan had constructed it. A fierce storm had contorted a large ash tree, prompting him to invest ample time in sawing and treating it. Gabriella was only a young girl at the time, just a tad taller than Sadie herself. And here was this shelter made of branches, almost as immense as a house. Sadie's offspring made his way to the vehicle just as she inquired, "Mom, where should I place the kettle?" "Right here. I've managed to sort everything out," her mother responded. Venturing into the shed, Sadie turned and asked, "Mom, is this where you're staying now?" "Indeed, where else could I go when the ceiling above gave way?" Her mother answered. Sadie scrutinized her carefully. Clearly, an incident must have occurred affecting her siblings, or perhaps Gabriella's kids. Such dire living conditions wouldn't be chosen without significant reasons behind them. But querying outright seemed too abrupt. Such topics were tender, especially for a mother. Perhaps later, she thought, when the time was more appropriate. They were swift to boil water, not in a kettle but a capacious pot, and soon they were sipping tea beneath the apple tree. Colton had prepped the spot nicely, arranging bags of provisions already laid out. The packaging caught Gabriella's eye, unusually sophisticated for her eyes. Breaking the silence, Gabriella ventured, "Sadie, you've vanished from our lives. What's your story, Ben? Where have you been all this while?" Sadie recounted, "We relocated to the capital initially, lingering there for a year. Father's job then took us overseas involuntarily, which extended far beyond what we had anticipated. It wasn't until my 20s that we returned to the capital. That was when I got married, had Colton, followed by a divorce. Each year, I planned to visit, yet something always came up, attending to Grandma, then Dad falling ill. But this year, with Colton on his university break, nothing could hold me back from spending the summer with you. Surely you wouldn't mind." "My dear Sadie, the thought of turning you away couldn't be further from my mind. I'm overjoyed at your return, though the state of things here is quite humble, as you see. We'll tackle these issues together, no need for worries," reassured Sadie. "Now tell me about you. How have things been with you?" Gabriella sighed. "There's not much to tell. Ethan passed away 15 years back, succumbed to an illness triggered by a common cold. I've been quite lonely without him. Life's just been ticking along. Adam has a pair of kids, grandchildren that is, and I've yet to meet my great-grandkids. Scarlett has one grandchild as well." Pausing, Sadie interjected, "Hold on, Gabriella. Are Adam and Scarlett still with us? Then—" "Seriously, Sadie, listen, I'm getting by, truly. They've got me holed up in the barn, living practically like a vagrant." A tear shimmered in Gabriella's eye as she continued, "They're too caught up in their own lives, sweetheart. You must understand, I don't hold it against them, being advanced in years as I am. I'll make do." "Mama Gabriella, how can you talk like that? Please, I need to have a word with them. Give me their phone number." "My dear Sadie, please, no harsh words towards them. Just don't." Her voice trembled, a palpable fear that they were being condemned. Sadie sensed this, and though she had much to express, she chose silence instead. Colton rose and returned indoors. "Oh, Sadie, it's all falling apart over there. I hope it doesn't end up hurting him." "Are you talking about Colton?" "Mama Gabriella, don't even entertain such thoughts. He's both clever and self-sufficient. Really, he can handle any challenge that comes his way." As they sat sipping tea, the conversation shifted towards a lighter note. Gabriella offered Sadie some of her homemade jam, which Sadie savored with a delighted roll of her eyes due to its exquisite taste. Eventually, Gabriella felt a wave of fatigue wash over her. "I'm going to rest a bit. Make yourself at home. This isn't exactly a shed. We've got a solid roof that keeps out the rain, no mosquitoes to bother us, and the couch Braden and I moved in. Of course, we had to enlist the neighbors' help. The two of us couldn't manage on our own. Go ahead, Mom. I'll get in touch with my brother and sister. Don't fret, all will be well." Gabriella went to lie down, leaving Sadie's son in contemplation. "Mom, there's work to be done. We just need to source the materials. We'll have to pop over to the next village to look into ordering some lumber and beams. Might even need to hire a few extra hands. Son, I'm sure you're up to it. I need to stay here with your grandmother, Gabriella. I can't leave her side. She's worn out. She might not be elderly, but she sure looks beyond her years. Mom, just let me know what you need from inside. I'll fetch it for you. With that, the son departed, and Sadie started settling in. Their drive over was filled with uncertainty about whether Gabriella was even still living here. They brought along a sizable tent and sleeping bags, planning to not leave immediately, but perhaps stay a few days. It seems their preparations were prudent, everything from a portable stove to enough food supplies. Sadie had something else on her mind initially, but decided to make a call instead. With her anger subsiding, she reached out to Adam. She remembered him as a level-headed, dear boy whom Sadie held dear. For a considerable time, Colton was baffled about who was on the other end of the call. When it dawned on him, he couldn't help but exclaim into the phone, "Sis, is that really you? Where are you now?" "I've just arrived at Mom's place, and I literally passed out. What on earth have you done to Mom? Did you even know she's living in what's practically a shack, scraping by like she's on the streets?" Sadie poured out her concerns for a lengthy stretch, while Adam absorbed every word, mostly in silence. Occasionally, he attempted to chime in, but cutting Sadie off was akin to stopping a freight train, even in their childhood days. Abruptly, she ended the call. Not long after, Gabriella regained consciousness. Sadie served her some soup, the warmth and taste of which hadn't graced Gabriella's lips in ages. These days, everyone usually opted for quick, economical meals. But this soup was different. It was rich with meat and made with care. The shadows were lengthening when Colton returned. He too sat down for the evening meal and shared his progress. "I've placed an order for the materials. Surprisingly, the service isn't half bad here. They're delivering everything first thing tomorrow, along with a couple of hands to help out. And you won't believe the prices, Mom. Back home, we couldn't get our hands on half as much for what they've charged me here. They'll clear out the debris tomorrow, then it's on to the roof, followed by the ceilings. If only they had more crew available, we'd wrap up in no time." Later, everyone settled for the night. Sadie took to the sofa in the shed next to Gabriella's mom's bed, while Colton slept in a tent. The next morning, they were stirred by the sound of voices. Sadie and Gabriella stepped out to see two vehicles parked at the gate. Adam was busy unloading items from one and from the other. A peculiar gentleman emerged, who happened to be Scarlett's spouse. As soon as they spotted Sadie, they dashed towards her, eager to embrace. Sadie was furious with them, yet overjoyed to see them nonetheless. There was no time for introductions, as a large vehicle carrying timber suddenly arrived, blaring its horn. Everyone hurried to tidy up the cars. Only then did Sadie recall Gabriella's presence. Gabriella stood silently, tears cascading down her cheeks. She had not laid eyes on the children in a multitude of years, impossible to tally. Adam was the first to speak. "Apologies, Mom. We've been a handful." Thanks to Sadie, she straightened me out. Soon after, Scarlett joined the fray. Amidst all the commotion, no one noticed an elderly man entering the yard. Clutched in his hand, he held a cluster of untamed flowers, wearing a mournful expression. He scanned the gathering and uttered, "Greetings, where is she?" "I came to bid farewell." Sadie gazed at Adam and Scarlett, only to find them gazing back at her grandfather with equal bewilderment. To whom were they to say goodbye? Whose departure were they mourning? They comprehended nothing. A deafening silence engulfed the yard until Gabriella's voice broke through as she emerged from the barn. "He's come to bury me." Witnessing the fleet of cars, he figured he ought to come. "What in the world were you thinking? You're 5 years older than me, so I'll put you to rest first. Bring your pathetic flowers here." Grandpa flung the flowers onto the soil. "My, what a sharp wit you possess, Gabriella. Honestly, it's a relief. I find myself quite lonesome here without your company." A single tear seemed to escape grandfather's eye. The youngsters around him finally pieced together the puzzle. It was a mix of hilarity and guilt. It sparked laughter yet felt awkward to laugh, because truly there was nothing humorous about it. The men had finished fixing the roof ages ago, while the ladies cleared out the household. Braden constantly endeavored to take charge, all while engaging in light-hearted squabbles with Gabriella. Today, Gabriella was so elated that even Braden's typical jabs just flew by unnoticed. As dusk fell, each person gathered around the well-known dining table. A considerable amount of effort had been exerted. The roof was nearly complete. Indeed, with 5 pairs of hands, the task was notably lighter than if merely a pair undertook it. Moreover, the interior of the household had been set in order. Gabriella presided at the table's end. Following the tidying of the house, they had warmed up the ancient bathhouse, which operated on old-fashioned wood heating, a method unfamiliar to Colton. However, emerging fresh from his experience, he declared it superior to any modern sauna he had encountered. The dinner conversation sparked a spirited debate among the siblings concerning the future residence of their mother. Gabriella alone remained mute. Despite her contentment, she had no intentions of relocating. After all, why would she leave? Her roots were deep here, with the house nearly restored and generations of family interred nearby. Even Braden rested here solo. She chose not to interject, opting instead to silently observe their familiar faces she had missed dearly. Interestingly, Adam had begun to sport silver in his hair, and Scarlett had visibly put on weight, a matter Gabriella thought to gently chastise her about, advocating self-care. Sadie, though older, still maintained a youthful silhouette, and her son, undeniably sharp and striking, was a source of immense pride for her. The anticipation of seeing her grandchildren the following day added a sparkle to her eye. They had blossomed into kind, admirable young women since she last saw them off to school. The comfort of the evening eased away the usual complaints of leg and back pains. Meanwhile, Braden, having taken a shot of liquor, was deep in conversation with Adam about political affairs. If it were within Gabriella's powers, she would freeze this moment forever, cherishing the bliss of being surrounded by her loved ones. Thank you all for your attention. I truly appreciate every like on the video. Until next time.